All right, welcome back, everyone. Another awesome episode on Beneath the Helmet, Season 3. Today, I got a chance to sit down with a licensed psychologist who works a lot with first responders, public safety, also an author. I get to sit down with Stephanie Conn today, a first responder psychology. We're going to really dive into peer support more than anything, but she's going to tell us all about, working with first responders, her two new books, the one that she's revising, and a new one coming out that's going to be pretty awesome. So I'm your host, Arjuna George, former fire chief turned coach, turned podcaster, author, and I'm here to share the wisdom of other professionals across the world to help you thrive in your careers and life. So welcome to the show, Stephanie Conn.
It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired fire chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
Welcome to the show, Stephanie Conn.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited about it, given our pre-conversations about the topic. So
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Likewise. I'd love to hear a little bit about just kind of who Stephanie Conn is and what kind of brought you to this industry of supporting public safety.
I was born into it. Dad was an officer for almost 40 years in a small town where the dispatcher was housed in the police department, and right across the alley was the fire department. And so I spent a lot of time going, anytime I went to my dad's office or he did any undercover work where he was supposed to be playing dad and not cop, he would take me to work with him sometimes. And so I was exposed to it very, very early. And then in my early 20s, I became a dispatcher, call taker, in North Texas. And then after about 3 years of dispatching, I decided to go to the other side of the radio and became an officer. And so I was an officer for Fort Worth Police. I was a peer support team member when I was an officer there. And so spent 9 years, about 9 years at Fort Worth. And then we'll get into the other kind of pieces of the story. When I ended up leaving policing, I still wanted my finger on the pulse in some regard while I was getting my education in first responder psychology, or in psychology specifically. And so I did on-call victim service work for another police agency for another 3 years. So I still went out and stayed in the yuck. Did the next of kin notification, went out on the accident scenes or death scenes or things like that. And so, all told, I don't know how I could have gotten away from it because of just a life of it.
Curious, during those years, seeing a lot of trauma, seeing a lot of pain, suffering, what were some of the things that kept you feeling well and response ready at that time? And that was years before you learned psychology, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I had a psychology undergraduate when I became an officer, and so I had some sense of understanding of just the basic psychology principles. And I always loved psychology. I grew up oddly with my dad being a police officer, watching him have strong reactions to certain things, and being very young when I knew that you didn't approach dad, you didn't stand over dad if he was sleeping, because he wouldn't mean to, but you'd startle him and he'd wake up swinging. And so I think I understood those things a bit earlier than most. And so I always had a bit of an eye for that. But more to your pointed question on how I took care of myself, as I sought counseling. I needed someone to talk to about all the things that I was dealing with. And then I also am just a lifelong learner. I was curious to know, why is this bothering me like this? What are the reasons why we do what we do, and what are the ways to work through it? And so I was chosen to be on the peer support team. I didn't apply. And so when I was chosen to be on the team, it was because I already was learning and kind of self-learning or taking courses on the side around wellness. And so I ended up finding myself in the peer support role of doing a lot of the training at my department on mental health, or identifying addictions and first responders and things like that. So even before I had any of the chops, I was being asked to, and kind of being called to look at those types of things. And so it's kind of crazy to even think about it. Because even when I was developing training, one of the trainings for our peer support team, they said, hey, none of us really know much about recreation. And I was like, what do you mean you don't know about recreation? Like, well, we don't have a life and identity, we don't do stuff outside of work. We only go to the places we're called for services on. So I just was like, oh, okay. So I'll just talk about all the ways you might kind of get engaged in your life outside of work. And they're like, hey, can you give this to the recruits so they can start recognizing when they're becoming too much into the job and not into their lives? And so seriously, 20 years ago, I created a document that I still use now and have shared with other people who have used it in their books. That's just like, make sure you're staying in your personal life. Make sure all the things you know about your area aren't because you've had calls for services there. Right. Which is kind of a crazy
for sure
concept. So
yeah, I can totally relate to that. And I'm assuming you're talking like hobbies and activities and in your communities, right? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I know so many first responders, including myself, who lost all those, right? As the years went on, we forgot about every single good hobby that we had, every part of life joy that we had for some strange reason. We just commit to the job more than anything, right? So,
Yep. Yep. And that was actually my doctoral dissertation, is what helps and what hinders first responders to maintain a life and identity outside of work. And I came to that question honestly and passionately because of my dad's career and what that kind of showed me in terms of what the costs were for imbalance. And even I tell people that the last conversation I had with my dad in person before he died 4 months later, he was very tearfully saying to me, I wish that I had made different choices as a parent. I wish I had, I did the best that I knew to do. Right. And I watched my dad not cry at his mom's funeral with great confusion as a child. But at this moment, 4 months shy of his death, he had tears in his eyes because he was riddled with regret. And that just was that thing that just lit it up under me. And it's like, I've got to somehow discover how first responders are doing this, what helps them do it, what hinders them from doing it, and try to foster that awareness when before 4 months shy of death.
Wow.
Right.
Cool.
So
what were some of the biggest takeaways from that report that you developed for school?
yeah. And it turned into, I ended up writing a couple of articles. And what's interesting is I remember, and I'm going to speak in generalities here for confidentiality purposes, but I remember talking to a firefighter that said, after, him married and I've got kids and, my first wife didn't tolerate my marriage to the job. So I got rid of her. And I was like, oh gosh. Okay. The second one, she tolerates my marriage to the job. So I keep her around. I remember thinking, what a sweetheart. He should really write Hallmark cards. And when I asked him why he didn't retire, he said he didn't want to go from a hero to a zero. And that really hit me because I thought to myself, so he's a father and a spouse. And I think he said he attended church, but all those amounted to zero in his mind compared to the hero role. And so another poignant story. But what I learned from the people is that some of them, it was their family members that just did not give up on them and just kept saying, hey, come to family dinner. Stop giving us the excuses. You can't, ship work aside, right? But just really kind of holding them accountable to stay, or friends that they had outside of work that made them, kept them accountable to who they were in all the diverse ways. Sometimes it was the story of other people. That one individual told me a story of going to a funeral and seeing someone, it was actually the child of the person who had died, and said, you knew my father better than I did. And that was the throat punch for him. He's like, I'm not going to have my kids saying that to somebody else. And so sometimes a person would have a health crisis or a relationship crisis, and it would cause them to start examining what they were doing and not doing and why, and start making different choices. And other times they took someone else's story as a cautionary tale for themselves. And so, and then other times it was a training that they had with the agency, or some messaging from a supervisor that said, don't, there's more to life than this job. They'll replace you the moment you're gone. Just like a hand that pulls out of the glass of water, the water will fill the space that was, the hand once occupied. And so there were a lot of things relating to, and as you can tell, many of them related to other people, helping them to stay true to who they are. And that plus their awareness and desire was really really key components there.
Well, that just kind of reinforces the power and the need to further discussions like we're having today, where people are
Yeah.
hearing stories about other people or hearing tidbits of education and knowledge and wisdom so they can maybe listen to one little small part that changes their life, right? So that's the importance
Yeah.
of podcasts, books, everything, right? So I love it. So going, I want to start off with your book and then we're going to dive into peer support.
Yeah.
But you're doing a new update on your book and it should be coming out shortly.
Yes.
Increasing resilience in police and emergency personnel. Tell us a little bit about what spearheaded and ignited writing that book to start with. And then what's your main message through that book?
Yeah, the first one published in 2018, and the expanded edition comes out in September of 2025 this year. And I was writing a mental health column for a police magazine. So every month I would write like a one pager on sleep or nutrition or communications and first responder families, things like that. And I was getting a lot of really positive feedback from folks, and some of the things that people said, I had several people urge me, why don't you kind of put all that stuff in one place, like compile it instead of this, monthly. And I had just finished my PhD. And so, you have nothing to do and you're so used to having everything on your plate. So I'm like, why not? I'll pitch the idea to the publisher. Who knows? I probably won't hear from him for eons, if at all. And I think I had a reply within 24 to 48 hours. And so it was like, oh crap, I think I might actually be onto something here. Because as part of what, when I pitched it to him, is I had to say what else is out there. And this was back in 2015, 2016, and there wasn't as much out there as there is now. And so I had identified something that was a need, and they saw that. And so I wrote it. And so the principal message then, and even in the new edition, is resilience is a practice. Resilience is like officer safety or first responder safety, insofar as it's a series of becoming aware through reflection practices, maybe quickly in the moment or in a more enduring way, and then taking some action towards being resilient. So if you go on a call scene and it's not safe for some reason, you have to, one, assess and see that that's the case, and then two, take some action towards making it safe. Well, our resilience is the same thing. And I want people to, and wanted people when I wrote it back then and more recently, to say, what are my awareness tools and what are my strategies once I become aware of what it is, rather than someone else will bring this to my attention necessarily.
I wouldn't say it's a tactic, but I'm going to use the word tactic. What tactic did you use to kind of really connect with first responders and get that message through them? Because sometimes that's a tough nut to crack. Is to get, especially when you're thinking about yourself, self-reflection, a little introspection, little tough for some people to understand and comprehend and even do sometimes. Did you have a secret sauce, kind of how you connected with those first responders?
Yeah, there's a secret sauce to everything, but I always spill the secrets because I think transparency is honesty, right? And that's builds trust. And so I tell people, I can understand. I go with their concern about self-reflection or tackling their demons or processing their traumas or tackling relationship issues. I go with those concerns and validate those concerns and say, yes, it would be easier to avoid dealing with that call. Yes, it would be easier to avoid that conversation with your significant. It would be easier to drink something that takes the edge off instead of you noticing this feeling of turmoil within. Yes, all of that would be easier. I don't disagree with you at all. We all have our things. But at what cost? And so a little bit of motivational interviewing, but I think more than that, and I was actually writing about this last week in my peer support book, is I have got to infuse hope from the very beginning. There has to be a reason. They've got to have some kind of hope and subparts or belief and expectation that if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to examine what's hard or going wrong for me or some way I need to change, I had better have some belief that there's value in this and an expectation that doing something's going to do something for me. And that, in fact, is hope, because I think it's actually I've actually opted for avoidance if there was no hope in working through something or getting better from it, right? That would probably be the wise. I mean, trauma specialists, coping specialists tell you that's actually wiser. If you can't do anything about it, it is actually better to distract yourself from it and focus on something you do, in fact, control or manage. And so I can't ask them to become aware of those things and be introspective or have those conversations with me if I don't bring in that second element, which is, and there's a real compelling reason to do this, and this is going to help you.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, hope is one of those things. I try to share that message as much as possible as well, because that is truly what seems to kickstart people, right? When there's just a glimmer of hope, right? So love that.
Yeah. 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 And that glimmer has to be kindled. I mean, it really has to be expanded. And again, I'm borrowing from in both books, and the second edition or first and second edition of the one, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants because I'm looking at people that have researched hope, that it's not this uh, lofty thought, but rather there's actual biological mechanisms that are at play. You know, we get endorphins and enkephalins and our own antihistamines. If we think we're getting an antihistamine given to us, our body will produce it. And there's a lot to that component. Even it's pretty fascinating. They administer naloxone to block the enkephalins and the endorphins. And people didn't have that same kind of physical relief from pain that they would have gotten from their hope. It's just really kind of fascinating stuff. So I
Almost
can
makes
nerd
me
out
want to.
a bit much.
Yeah, it almost makes me want to do a whole episode just on hope.
Oh gosh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
I
love
would,
that.
yeah. I know a few people to recommend for
Oh, that'd be cool.
the interviews. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So for the reader out there who's read your first edition already, what's new in the upcoming updated revision of your book? What would they expect to see different?
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about the timeline. I wrote it in 2016, 2017, launched in 2018. Oh my gosh, what happened in 2019, 2020? Like a lot, COVID and civil unrest and the Great Resignation, where a lot of agencies saw significant departures from, their department, and in turn, fewer people applying for first responder positions, and younger people moving up in the ranks to try to fill the spots and do their best to keep the agency, going and keeping everything in operation. And so you have people with less experience and less training and less support taking on more responsibilities with higher call volumes, greater levels of violence in many regards. And so the chronicity of their exposure to things is up, but then their resources to manage those have been down, not across the board, but in many regards down. But so that put on other strains, things like moral injury, things like more of a cumulative, and we've known about cumulative post-traumatic stress, but really like the accumulation of the wear and tear on the body is very different, where and so there's the demands have been different. But then on the other side, and this is why I said not fully, there's also some of the knowledge that we have on what makes us resilient and what do we understand about inoculating ourselves from psychological trauma, and some of the advances in neuroscience and some of the advances in technology that helps us track these things and track our progress, or, and create changes without having to go ask somebody else, how am I doing, but rather to see that for ourselves. And there's been a lot of advances in peer support. And while the book isn't about peer support, there is a chapter that talks about, and here's the organizational approach to this, and how peer support, some of the advances there can also be expanded in a way that wasn't even possible when I wrote the first edition. So,
I can't wait to read the second edition.
yeah.
So as we jump into kind of the main theme of peer support, I'd love to hear your thoughts on where are we in peer support right now across public safety? Where are we doing good? Are we lacking? Are we halfway there? Where do you think we are, just to start the conversation?
Oh, gosh. Depends on who you ask. And I know you're asking me, so that's a cop-out answer for me. I think in some regards, some agencies are just gobbling up. They're just like, what's best practices? What do we do? How do we incorporate that? Okay, I know some peer supporters that they are just beast when it comes to taking on their education or listening to the podcast or doing the readings. I know some people that are doing like somatic experiencing courses or conflict resolution courses and other courses that they're doing to really sharpen their skills. And then you have some that are still working peer support off the corner of their desk, as they say, with a mounting call load and mounting some position that normally would be split among, or some role that would be split among 2 or 3 people is now one person. So I think in some regards, in some agencies, in some areas, and with funding shortfalls and things like that, it's limping. I know that there are many more agencies and when I say agencies, not necessarily police or fire agencies, but organizations rather, national and state organizations that are saying, "Hey, let's get better organized on what peer support is. Let's create some standards and let's move away from this being a solely reactive. Okay, critical incident, crisis, car accident, OIS, those types of things. And let's move more to the prophylactic, everyday kind of stuff." So with some standardization on people being trained. And I think one of the things that's changed over the last 10, 20 years it's becoming less of, okay, who wants to be in peer support? Group of people raise their hand versus who's best for our peers to be peer support. And so I think we've kind of put some teeth in the criteria of that so that, we're getting higher caliber support for our first responder peers.
An organization like police, fire, paramedics, military that are kind of embracing it more than the other, or are they all kind
That's
of?
also very regional because I've had people say, "Oh my gosh, the fire people, they are," and this will be like over in the Florida, over on the East Coast, man, the fire, they are just all about it. They are just dialed in. And this is a sweeping statement because I know there's people that are in the police side on the East Coast that have their stuff together. But then on the West Coast, they're like, "No, man, it's police. We can barely get fire. Oh my gosh, fire. They're 150 years of tradition unimpeded by progress over here. Holy crap, there's some of that going on." And so it's really hard to say which one's embracing it more. Because even with me being on the West, I've bumped up against it in fire where I'm like 150 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. And I'm like, okay, I've, made some recommendations and they're just like, yeah, we can't really do that. And I was like, well, why can't you do that? That's the best practices. That's what's being touted at the national level. That's what the research shows from the people who I've interviewed and whose work I've read. Well, hem-ha, you know, yeah. And I even remember, and I'm going to be very careful here, standing in the parking lot of the fire department, and someone said, "Man, I wish we knew what to do to help our people." And I'm kind of a direct person. And I said, "You do, you're just not doing it." Um, I don't know what else to say.
Like,
But then I have a fire department, and actually their shirts are hanging on the thing behind me. I'll try to be somewhat general here. That they're dialed in. They're just like, "Hey, can you come in and do TRE with our folks? Can you come in and do ride-alongs and sit at the kitchen table and have curated conversations with our folks?" And so, and then I have police similarly. I've got some police saying, "Hey, bring in Alpha STEM, bring in TRE, bring in ASAP," all the acronyms for all the shenanigans I'm into these days. And then I have others go, "Mm, that's weird stuff. I don't think we can get anybody to do that." So I'm giving you the least specific answer, but that's the
reality.
reality in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, 100% reality. Yeah. So, what is about peer support that's so kind of intriguing to you to dig into so deep that you want to write a book about it and really kind of, I don't know about specialize in it, but really be a focus of your practice? Why peer support?
Yeah, and that's actually the part of this of my background that I didn't share because I knew we would get to that. Eventually, is when I was a peer support team member, we had a police psychologist when I first came on, and on the department and on the team, and he was a police psychologist. Like he understood police and fire because we had a joint academy. And it was a great help to us at a time when we needed a great help when my coworker was killed in the line of duty. About a year later, he had been replaced by a city psychologist that did not understand first responders could be working with some of the street department, fire department, police department with no specific training or education or experience in that. And another one of my coworkers was killed in the line of duty, and it was her debut to the department. Now, we at the peer team knew her, but through regional or routine trainings and things like that. But the department didn't know her, so her debut was at Dwayne's death. And I'm a peer support team member leaning on the back wall, and I was briefed fully on how Dwayne died because I was supposed to be receiving the family. And so they said, we want you to have all the information in case they have questions. You're going to be the liaison, and which is horrible. It's a privilege, but it's also a gut-wrenching experience. And thankfully for me and for them, they opted to go with church members as their support systems. And I was like, okay, fine, good. So I got reassigned to the crisis management briefing. And as I'm leaning on the wall, watching people kind of rumbling, like, who's the stranger in our house talking about our fallen brother, she read the room as well, knowing I was the only other one briefed to the same level of detail that she had been. He asked me to come up and take it from there. And so I did, which was gut wrenching, and then did it again at the next crisis management briefing. But then I had other people saying, I don't want to talk to her. I don't know her. She doesn't know us. Might be a nice lady. Thanks. No, thanks. I'd rather talk to you. And I was like, well, great. I get that, but I can't offer you couples counseling. I can't offer you whatever it is. I'm quote, just a peer supporter. And so I looked out, saw that there was this gaping hole, made the calculated choice that I would step out and become a police psychologist and specialize in working with first responders because of my background and because of that need for that. But it never left me that some people will not go see a mental health person, but they will go see a peer supporter. That never, ever, ever left me then. And then even as because I'm the clinical advisor or oversee or coordinate with many peer support teams, that theme didn't leave. I mean, yes, there's more first responder clinicians, but there are still people that will not go see a clinician, or clinicians are not available, which is another thing. We have the shortfall. Or they won't do the virtual thing, and there's no one in their community, or if they went in their community, they'd have to walk in their door and someone would see them. And so there's about 1,000 reasons that I can't go into due to time that someone is not going to seek services from a first responder clinician. So I think our best course of action is to fortify the people they will go see, give them every tool, have them feel supported as peer supporters, have them feel like they've got someone that's got their back in case they do find themselves in over their head. And so, and then I've actually found that in doing that, that's great. But then if person does come to see me, the peer support people are still, to the degree that the client, aka first responders, agrees to this, are still engaged in helping this person navigate the things at work. It isn't just passing the person on to Stephanie and then the person's disengages with peer support. Peer support still needs to help them when they return to work, or support them, or be there for them, or normalize certain organizational things I couldn't do. And so I think if we don't understand the value of peer support, we are shortchanging our first responders, period.
A very interesting point there about the return to work power that a peer support team has. I don't know if I've heard people talk about that before. It's always about, just after an incident, or just around a real acute incident, not necessarily when they come back from maybe being off for 6 months or a year or something like that. That's pretty powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. And part of what I do, and this is it's somewhat peer support, but kind of secondarily, is I assist agencies I'm on contract with for the return to work program. And, if they've got a peer that's assigned to them, they may say, hey, look, they are good for this kind of assignment, or, not that everybody gets what they asked for. This is not the nature of this profession, but where possible, hey, this would help them to reintegrate. hey, I've had conversations with them, and because I've been out of it long enough, this is where, in some regards, the peer supporter can help me translate. Okay, so they have concerns about this. Tell me what that means. Tell me, do you know of any, like, who's the person to even talk to see what that looks like? So they become a critical piece of that, either return to work or while out of work, while they're off on stress leave or injury leave, they continue to engage in that because it's 168 hours in the week. I get one of them maybe.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome. I love
and
that.
they need a team for the remaining, and maybe it's their significant others, maybe it's their peer supporter, maybe it's your chaplain, maybe it's all of them that's going to come in with something different while they're out and when they return. Or even if they're trying to decide, do I go out? These are people that they might have conversations with to see what's right for them.
I think people who go through trauma and, tough incidents, that kind of thing, that's one thing. But what I hear the most pain is coming back to work and feeling very isolated, very alone, kind of put off to the corner, your damaged goods. And that's
Mhm,
that's a tough thing to hear, is that return to
mhm,
work. So
mhm.
that's a good part. I love that. So what would be some main, like, somebody listening right now is like, okay, I got a peer team. It's okay. It's here. It's on paper. What would be the key things that a peer team needs for success? Anything like the top things that a peer team could really embrace for success in their own organization?
How much time do you have?
Pick
So,
pick the top ones. Pick the top couple
okay.
that you think are
Okay,
like mission
sorry, I have
critical.
so many opinions on this, and because I'm actively writing this, I'm actively researching this, so I have lots of
Yeah.
information. So I think part of it is building your team in the first place, right? So again, the old school practice of whoever raised their hands is the person that gets on there is, while certainly that checks one box in terms of interest, and maybe even part of a box for availability, suitability is altogether a different thing. And so I think just making sure you do have a robust program for screening and making sure, because even some people, and I've had this happen a couple of times, not super often, but a couple of times where someone was actually nominated by their peers. Hey, we trust this person. We like this person, and the person is interested and has that criteria, meets criteria in terms of like, emotional intelligence and coping mechanisms and stuff. But then when we go to interview them, they're still tangled up in their own trauma. And you cannot help someone else, or tangled up in their own relationship issue or health issue or what have you. And you cannot help someone else when you are still trying to get through this yourself. And I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not optimal. And so I've had a few people that I'm like, you would be great, but not yet. Not until you get your own stuff straight and you care for yourself and, quite frankly, you practice what you preach, and then show up having the wisdom gained from that being in your rearview mirror, whatever that thing is. So I think the onboarding process and making sure, again, the interest is there, the availability is there, the competencies are there. And that includes your own self-awareness and self-coping and your coping mechanisms in your own support system. So you're not doing this at your own expense and then you're off the team soon after, right? I think the next thing, and this is I think where some agencies falter, maybe not mine because I'm attached to them, so that wouldn't make sense, but is then they get initial training and then nothing else. They get initial onboarding and no other ongoing support. And I think that is a setup. And a friend of mine, Trey, said it really well. He said, do we put people on SWAT team because they raise their hand? No. Do we let them stay on SWAT team without regular training for updating their and practicing their skills? No. Why would we do that with peer support? Why would we not continue to help to have regular training where they can practice their skills? You've got, for SWAT, you've got to make sure you're hitting the target and you can do it while kneeling and running and doing this and that and the other. And um, uh, what if you've got to think quickly at 3 a.m. for a peer, right? Have you practiced that? Do you know what that looks like? So I think some of it is onboarding is important. Ongoing training is important. And then here's the one that is most uncomfortable for people: offboarding. When someone has, at one point in time, was great for the team, it was great for them, it was a mutual win-win, but their circumstances have changed. Either they've taken a promotion, that's taken up their time or makes it a conflict of interest. They've had kids that take up their time and a priority. And no shade on that. That's, it's just what life is. Or they've become burned out and their effectiveness is lessened. So having a means to offboard people or put pauses, and that really gets people cagey when I say that, because they're like, oh, but this means so much to them, and they'd help so many people. And I was like, yes. So let's all practice what we preach and hit the pause button. Let them go take care of themselves. They're not being kicked off. Let's just hit the pause button and see if it makes sense for them to come back 6 months or a year from now. And if it doesn't, let's care enough to hurt their feelings and say that a year from now.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, those are good. Those are good tips for sure. There's an element of me that thinks there's a gap of leadership being in peer support. Do you agree with that? Is there like fire chiefs, police chiefs? Do they have access to peer support as much as officers? And if
No.
not, what can we do about that?
Yeah, that's come up quite a bit, because some of the people, because I've been with teams long enough that, and again, a lot of people are promoting quickly after the Great Resignation. So people suddenly find themselves in executive or administrative positions, still have all the stuff that they had last year, or the year before. I'm not saying they got baggage per se, but they still have their own needs. And then now they're doing a job that they may not feel supported at, and they still have a kid that acts like a maniac, or all the things that all of us have, right? But they can't talk to anyone in peer support because they're subordinates. And they're like, well, where's the team for us across the board? And when I was doing my research, not for, because I haven't gotten to that section in the peer support book yet, but I will. But when I was doing it for the resilience book, I just started asking my colleagues, hey, does anybody know of peer support for administrators, for executives? And there was a handful of people who said, yep, we got it in New York, we've got it in New Jersey, we've got it here, and we've got it there. But it seems to be like a statewide, or like a state association based for people in that profession. And so I'd have to look to see if IAFF has one. I don't know if you know that or not, but I know it's sorely missing across the board as far as I'm concerned.
Pretty sure the IF does, but once again, it wouldn't include administration, right? Fire chiefs and chief officers.
Yeah.
I know in the province I live in, British Columbia, probably about 2 or 3 years now, they've had a peer support for all of chiefs in BC, and they get annual training. So that's a new initiative, but it seems to be working very well. And they do annual training at the convention, get up to speed on the new things, a lot of role playing, but they're there to support the leadership in BC.
Mhm. Yeah, and I have been asked to do some versions of it, but it's kind of an interesting take, because sometimes I'm asked to do a training on critical incident stress management and peer support to administrators, for the purpose of, so they can understand what their subordinates are doing and why they're going to improve over time, or we're going to do it this way versus that way. So it still isn't about them. It's about them doing their job for other people. But but I'm starting to get the request for the little sidebar. Oh, and for us as well. And so in fact, I'm going to be presenting in December on a little bit of that. Pay for your people, but oh wait, what about us? Right. So I'm finding that to be an interesting combination I'm being asked to deliver. So.
Yeah, once again, I think all the support that's out there, it seems the administrators, the officers, the chiefs seem to be the missing link and don't get access to that, or think they don't need it in the first place, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I don't know, because the ones I've talked to, every one of them has said I need it. And maybe that's why we're having a conversation, right? But I think, again, what I just keep thinking of, and this is both the police and fire, because I consult with both, but who would that even be? Right. And there's some things that I can't even discuss outside of this agency anyway. So even some of the things, I'm like, yeah, okay, I get that. But can you discuss what your stress level is, or just the kind of a theme of, managing the situation, not the particulars of it. But
Wow.
yeah.
Well, hopefully, maybe we talk in a couple of years and there's a huge advancement in that arena. What do you think would be some of the pitfalls for starting or maintaining a healthy, robust peer support team?
Well, I think some of it is, and this is actually some of the research that I found when I was writing about building one, is that sometimes agencies will get funding to build one, but the funding won't last for them to sustain one. And so again, really great start, everybody's energized, and then the funding dwindles away, and then they don't know quite how to keep it going from a financial standpoint. And a lot of grants will pay for training, but they won't pay for overtime that's required for someone to attend a training. So a lot of grants specifically omit that, and then agencies that are already cash strapped um, have a hard time, or short staffed, have a hard time maintaining um, just even people's ability. I can't count how many times I've had people registered for a course and be pulled from the course, registered for a course, pulled from the course because of staffing shortages and things like that. So I think some of it will be that. And then I think there are some people that they don't know what they don't know. And so they build teams without consulting with anyone, or they just go online and download policies without necessarily understanding or getting an advisor. And of course, I'm unbiased, saying you really should have an advisor, someone that can oversee certain things, because even just this week, I've consulted with peer support twice in the last 3 days over matters. And some of them were things that if you Google it, you're just not going to find it. Like this is just something that is really hard to come by. And I said, hey, look, I've got it. I'm going to send you um, this legal opinion that relates to these things that will help you not get sued. Because it sounds like if you did what you're thinking of doing, you have a possibility of being successfully sued. Which is odd considering you're just like, oh, wait, what? We can get sued for trying to help people? Yes, you can. And so I think some of the pitfalls are that. And then I think also some of the pitfalls, just as a clinician that has assisted in creating vetting criteria for clinicians, and then a colleague of mine has done it on the chaplain side, is making sure you don't have the pitfall where you get a clinician that doesn't know what they're doing, or a chaplain that doesn't know what they're doing. The chaplain raises his or her hand and says, I will be there for your people. And then they don't know what that looks like. They don't have any training in crisis intervention. They have, all of the trainings in theology and perhaps even some interpersonal skills training, but they may not have crisis intervention training to the same level that would be required for peer support. Or a clinician that has her degree, which is in, an expertise, which is in mental health and counseling and psychology. That is not the same thing as crisis intervention, which is what peer support is, or the laws relating to that. And so I think sometimes people, and I, again, speak very carefully here. I remember vetting a clinician that said she'd had no training in peer support. She just did what someone else did where she used to work, and she was supervising a team. And I said, do you have the foundational training? No. Okay. And you're supervising them? Okay. And and she was doing some other things that were actually a conflict of interest, that like if the licensing board found out what she was doing, she would actually be practicing outside of her scope. And she actually sent me a nasty email and said, I just didn't understand how things work in small communities. And I was like, I actually grew up in a small community. I actually do have a clue. It's not an excuse for poor ethics and for ignorance and for not taking training. So occasionally, and she said, but I asked the agency and they had no concern about me doing this. And I said, it's not their job to know. It's a concern. It's your job to know, because agencies don't know what they don't know. They trust providers to be an expert in their area that they're practicing. And when you're not, agencies shouldn't feel like they have to triple check someone's credentials. Well, what does it actually mean? How is this person training in peer support hit? Where is their training in peer support? So I think that's a pitfall too, which again can get agencies. And when I say, there's the logistical stuff or the procedural stuff, but then it comes down, all those things are there for a reason. It comes down to actually harming the individual peers that aren't getting what they deserve. And that's, there's the human cost to this, not just the agency cost, there's the human cost to it. So I want to be very clear. That is also a very high priority when I am fussy about people's credentials.
I love that last point because that's essentially what we're doing the job for in the first place, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the procedures are there to protect that. So,
When we chatted offline, you mentioned the phrase listen differently. What
mhm.
does that mean? What does that mean?
Yeah, I've still got to figure out how I'm going to word this as I write it. I mentioned that people often, in fact, I was riding out with the fire department the other day, and one of the firefighters asked me, okay, so you listen to people's trauma stories all day, every day for years. Who do you talk to? How do you do that? And we were actually walking back to the rig from a call, and I was like, how do I even sum this up before we get in the rig? I don't even know how to say this before we put the headsets on. And I was just like, well, I talk to people, but I also listen differently. And then we got the headset on and I gave him a little bit of the spiel, but not everybody in the rig wants to hear my answer to his question. So I spoke with him separately. But I tell people I listen to, and I hear horrific stories from clients, tell me horrific things over, over a decade and even beyond. And I listen not to the contents, which sounds terrible. Someone can tell me about a dead kid call or this graphic abuse case or those kinds of things. But I actually listen and go, no one's going to be asking me to testify on the details of this violent event. That is not what I'm here for. They don't need me to advise them on any of that. I'm actually going to pull back and listen and pay attention to what's happening between that person telling the story and me listening to it. And I'm listening going, this is a person that is trust themselves enough to tell a story, to not shove it down into the soles of their shoes. That's what I'm listening for. And when they hesitate or stop or shift gears, then I go, oh, that's a hurt point or that there's something. So I'm listening to how they're engaging with the story because I care about them, not the story. Then I'm also listening to it because I'm like, and wait a minute, they're also trusting me with the story. So I need to mentally step back and go, wow, this is pretty cool. What a job that I have that someone trusts me to not censor a story, to say what they experience and they just say it. What a beautiful process is occurring right now. They're trusting the process. They're trusting me. They're trusting themselves. I love it. And then if ever that changes or they say something that gives, I'm going, oh, they might be questioning that trust in the process or in me or those types of things. Okay, I need to listen for that. The third track, if you will, is compassionate empathy. The difference between that and the different type of empathy is, and how am I going to help this person work through this and heal from this? So I'm always listening to that. So I'm listening to, are they giving me any indications of their faith? Are they giving me any indications of their support system or their value system? And is there anything there that I am going to now bring back into the conversation? Because if I get lost in the trauma, I'm lost. That we call that emotional empathy. I start feeling it. It's vicarious trauma. It's not good. Clinicians get it. Chaplains get it. Peer supporters get it. Not helpful. If I get cognitive and go, okay, what's the thing I'm supposed to say that's the right emotion I'm supposed to label? Also not good. But if I go to that compassionate empathy, which is that one I just described, which is I can understand, I can relate to what they're feeling, but I need to also it still is their thing, and I need to sit alongside them and try to help them figure out how to move through it. And that is rewarding. That is compassion satisfaction because then I get, and it's beautiful when if I check my metrics and my watch and my ring, instead of me being stressed to the max during that session, that critical incident follow-up or what have you, I am the most regulated I am probably the entire day because I'm paying attention to what I'm supposed to be doing and why. Whereas some other time I'm just like reading emails, eating food, spilling at my keyboard. I might not be as aware of what I'm doing and how I'm, digesting or not digesting emails and lunch.
I love that. Yeah, and I think that is the secret sauce. Once again, that word secret sauce. I don't know, you don't usually say that, but for some reason it's coming up twice in this episode. The secret sauce of developing trust with your person too, right? When you're showing up
Yeah.
like that, that is you are building trust day one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think again, and it's interesting because I was just reading the difference, on how to teach empathy, and it's an interesting thing because they were talking about it from like medical providers or healthcare providers, and they're just like they have so much knowledge about what someone might be going through that they tend to take a scientific approach. Let me explain this, let me explain that, and it's disconnecting them from their patients, and the connection isn't there. And so even me being a nerd, self-proclaimed nerd, I know a lot of stuff about trauma. I know a lot of information about why your brain's going to do this and your body's going to do that. And so I have to go, okay, time, connection first, validation, understanding, normalization, all that kind of stuff. And then when they feel all that, then I can insert some of the science behind why they might be feeling what they're feeling, right? Or meaning not why they're feeling like a feeling, but why their brain sends them intrusive images for hours and sometimes weeks after the event. And you can call that kind of validating their experience because you're saying it could make you feel crazy. You're not crazy. That's actually a very adaptive process in the brain. But if you don't connect with that feeling first, you can't just start hitting them with information. And I know peer supporters may be going, yeah, I don't do that. But again, as I mentioned earlier, I know a lot of peer supporters that go and get advanced training or they go do their own therapy work and they know a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff. And I want them to have that same kind of awareness and that same caution where they don't start hitting their peers with what they learned in their therapy or their class they took or whatever and leave the peer feeling in the dust because they were just talked to or at.
The word that pops in my mind is meet them where they are, right? And not
Oh, yeah.
force anything on them. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
So, Stephanie, is there anything that I haven't asked you yet around peer support that you wish I asked you?
Oh, well, um, hmm. I can't think of anything. I should have been warned 'cause, listen to your podcast to be prepared for said question, but I can't think of kind of bad, uh, speaker here. I can't think of anything because you did ask me, the pitfalls, and you did ask me kind of first things to know. Um, yeah, I can't think of anything, honestly.
Sounds good. So, before we wrap up, as a fellow TRE provider, I'd love to dive into just a couple minutes about TRE and your journey through that. So, TRE, tension trauma release exercises, you are now our provider just
Mhm,
recently, I think just over a year now. So,
mhm.
I'd love to hear how you got into it in the first place. Like, how did you even find it, and what were you trying to feel in your life, and what changed when you did TRE?
Yeah, it I learned so much from clients and peer supporters and agencies, and I was, working with a fire peer team, and one of the peer team members said, "Hey, there's this thing called TRE, and it's really good. They're using it in the military. It facilitates a natural process in the body where the body releases tension in some regards and sometimes trauma in other regards, and we use this when we come back from a call when we can because I think we should actually all be using this on a regular basis and make this kind of, widespread." And I was like, "Do what?" It's called what? And so then I looked into it and I was like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, there actually is something to this. There's research that supports this." It's tied into what I understood in terms of uh, the biology of psychological trauma and these types of things. And so I started that training and I was like, whoa, okay, this is weird. I have a very physical lifestyle. I did personal training while I was in like as a trainer, and I was like, this kind of fits the bill in terms of understanding how the psychobiology or psychophysiology of trauma. I like this. It's the nexus of the two. And so I did the initial training and then I set it aside and I think COVID hit about that time after I did the initial training. And so I did a few other kind of distance training, and it never really left me. And I was like, I want to go back and just, and I would tremor from time to time, but I never really um, went all in. And then I was like, okay, I need to go all in because I know the value in this. And I continue to see clients that are physically keyed up. And in some cases, when I'm doing other forms of trauma, they start tremoring. And I was like, trauma treatment, that is, they start tremoring. And I was like, just a reminder that there's a thing out there that's going to take this to the next level to really give them relief rather than it just being this sidebar to the impact of brain spotting or EMDR, which are two of the treatments that I use. So I went back and got that certification. It come full circle. I went back as part of the certification. You have to have a group of people that you practice with. You don't charge them for it. They're your practice people. And so you can be evaluated, make sure you know what in the world you're doing. And so I went back to that peer supporter and I said, guess what? I'm at the final stages. Do you have any interest in me providing it for your crew? No charge, but you do have to be videoed. And he goes, absolutely. We'll go out of service and do it. So I was able to do it, and it was super cool. And then now I find myself doing that sometimes once a week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, individual basis with my clients, but on a group basis, because when an agency asks me for it and they have a small group of people that do it, then the people in that group tell somebody else. And then the next time the group is those core 4 or 5 people, plus 7 more, or core 3 or 4 people, plus 6 more that weren't there the last time. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna be the wiggler in this group, I guess. So yeah.
Cool. So I'm very curious what you learned about yourself doing TRE.
Oh, I have control issues. Um, right. Yeah, dude, right.
Yes.
And so, which is what other people are saying too, because when I went back to tremoring on like a very regular basis, because I was, working through the certification process, which means do your own process and reflect on it. Because I was like, why is it not doing what I'm seeing other people doing? And why is it not moving beyond here? And how am I supposed to get it to do there? Am I not, And so I wanted to kind of force it because I wanted it to be the experience that I saw other people having, or the quality that I thought I was supposed to have based upon some notion. And so I remember even in my self-reflection, because we have to keep the log when you get certified, I was just like, do I even know, am I even doing this right? Right. Because I'm not getting it. And then I started getting it when I started letting go. And I'm just like, it is what it is, that will do what it is. Just slow down and pay attention to what's happening. And it's really fascinating because I did one the other day, and I'm listening to music while I'm doing it. And I was like, oh, there it is. I can feel it. I can feel it building. And I would not have felt it building before. I would have moved because I was frustrated that it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do, or it was taking too long. And I would have missed it if I hadn't been quiet and went inside and paid attention, that I could feel it starting to build momentum. And then it was just like off to the races. So I was like, and then it just looks wild. So, and feels great.
Yep. I couldn't agree more with the mind body connection that allows you to do. A lot of us go through life kind of disconnected from how we feel in our bodies, right?
Mhm.
And for myself, being a TRE provider and also doing TRE in my own practice, I've allowed to understand and listen to my body so much better than I did prior to TRE. It's an amazing tool for that, for sure.
Yeah. Which I think that is a challenge for, and I'm sure you find it to be the same when you've got first responders. They oftentimes are taught to be externally directed. And so paying attention to, and even some clinicians will say, hey, don't pay attention to that racing heart, or don't that rapid breath, because it will just make your breath more rapid and your heart race more. And there's validity to that advice in some context. And, but when you have either taught yourself or others have taught you to pay attention to other things and to ignore that because that will make it worse, or that will be unsettling to you, we do that. And then so asking someone to go in is hard to get people to do that at first. And so that's where I will normalize and say, It's going to be weird. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you actually have the gas pedal and the brake pedal in the car here. So if anytime you want to hit the brakes, you can. But then you can go back to the gas when you're ready to go back to the gas pedal in this process.
So happy you found Thierry.
Yeah. I'm excited about your expansion of it to first responders, and
Yes.
I'm really stoked about that. And we'll talk more offline on that. But I really feel like that's another tool that peer supporters can bring to, and I talk about it in both books actually, that they can bring that to the table so that their peers can take that tool from the peer or from the clinician, whoever takes them through the process, and then use that for themselves again and again and again, building up that self-reliance, self-efficacy. I know what this is. I'm tuning in. That's what I really want for peers.
Awesome. Well, Stephanie, it's been an honor to chat with you and kind of hear your wisdom around everything mental health and first responders, but, definitely digging into the peer support aspect of how to build a winning and successful peer support that really is there for our people and not necessarily for anything else. It's there for our people.
Yeah.
So how can people learn more about you, connect with you, and how can they order your book?
I am on LinkedIn, so that's the professional site that is under Dr. Stephanie Conn, Conn. And I have actually I have my First Responder Psychology has a LinkedIn page too as a business. And then I have my website, firstresponderpsychology.com, and a Facebook page for my business. And so I sometimes post things that I'm getting into or places I'm going or that kind of thing, or research that I have. And the book that's coming out in September is available for pre-order at Amazon. And a Canadian friend of mine said, it's not on Amazon.ca yet. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm not in control of that, but it will be soon. And then once it's launched in September and I start getting my copies, which will be in September as well, I will have a bulk of copies myself. So if anyone wanted to buy it directly from me instead of paying Amazon, they can buy it directly from me, and I can sign it in the continental US. Unfortunately, the cost to ship to Canada is stupid expensive right now. But I can ship it anywhere in the US. And then if you're in Canada, message me anyway. I go back. I have both citizenships. I go back and forth fairly often. Who knows?
Okay.
I might be able to bring it up on the next time I come up and ship it. Yeah. It never hurts to ask.
Whereabouts in Canada do you usually come up to? The West Coast, East
Vancouver.
Coast? Oh yeah,
Vancouver. Yeah. All many of my friends are Vancouver and then over on the island. And so,
Oh, nice. Awesome.
yeah. So,
Well,
yeah.
not too far from me then.
Yeah.
And then your second book, The Peer Support, that's due out in 2026, 27?
Yeah, 2026. It better not be 2027. I am on. It's going to be either 10 or 11 chapters, depends on how it shakes out. And I write out of order because I write based upon what's coming up for me, because I write based on what's coming up in my work. And so I'm on chapter 7 right now. So 7 of 10 is not bad, but I got to go back and finish 5 and 6. And so it's due, my manuscript's due December 31st. So, and it takes them 6 to 8 months to crank it out. So I expect by next summer of 2026.
You have a title yet?
Yeah, I knew you would ask. So I actually printed it and put it here beside, because my friend in Vancouver said, what's the title? I said, I don't know. I know what the content is. I can never remember the title. I didn't remember the title of my first book either. I just knew the content. It is Building Effective Peer Support Teams, a guide to creating resilient first responders.
Awesome. Can't wait to read it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate your time and sharing your wisdom with all our listeners today on Beneath the Helmet. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate your support of all this.
Awesome. All right, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed this awesome episode and took lots of notes on how to develop and kind of foster your own successful peer support team in your own organization. Feel free to reach out to Dr. Conn if you have any questions, or and also her amazing books that are going to be out shortly this September and as well as next year for the peer support. So until next time, stay well. All right, that's a wrap.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.